The scream tore through the plantation house like a rifle shot, jolting me from the ledger I'd been poring over by candlelight. I dropped the quill, ink splattering across the accounts of cotton yields, and bolted up the stairs two at a time, heart pounding against my ribs. Eliza's cries, raw animal, echoed from the birthing room where the midwife's voice cut in sharp and urgent. "Push, ma'am, push now!" By the time I burst through the door, sweat beading on my forehead despite the chill autumn draft, the room reeked of blood and fear. Eliza lay on the sweat-soaked bed, her face twisted in agony, gripping the quilt like it was the only thing tethering her to this world. The midwife, old Mrs. Hargrove, with her iron-gray bun and calloused hands, glanced up at me, her eyes wide. "It's coming, Mr. Harrington, a boy, I think." But as the infant's wail pierced the air, weak and furious, something shifted in the shadows of the room, a cold whisper, or maybe just my imagination, born of too many sleepless nights hearing the old tales. Eliza slumped back, exhausted, her chest heaving, and reached for the child. That's when I saw it, her eyes once bright as the Mississippi sun glazing over like fog on the river at dawn. "Elias," she murmured, her voice a thread, "protect him." Then in a blink she was gone. Not dead, no body slumped lifeless. Vanished. The bed empty, the quilt undisturbed, as if she'd never been there at all. I staggered forward, the babe still squirming in the midwife's arms, and a chill settled in my bones deeper than any winter I'd known. This wasn't fever or hemorrhage. This was the curse come again, just like with mother and grandmother before her. Every Harrington wife lost after bringing forth an heir, and now it was mine to face. The lantern's flame flickered as I knelt by the blood-stained sheets, the metallic tang still thick in the air of our cabin. Eliza's cries from labor had echoed through the night, but now silence pressed down like a shroud, broken only by the faint gurgle of our newborn son in the cradle. I reached for her hand. Gone. The bed empty save for a single silver locket she'd worn since our wedding. Its chain snapped as if yanked by force. My fingers trembled as I clutched it, the engraved EH mocking me in the dim light. How could she vanish from a locked room? Door barred from inside. The window was intact, no footprints in the mud outside. Whispers from the plantation hands had warned me of the Harrington curse, but I'd dismissed them as superstitious rot. Now, with the Mississippi River murmuring beyond the cypress trees, doubt clawed at my gut. I stood pacing the rough-hewn floorboards, my boots thudding softly against the pine. The baby stirred, his tiny fists waving like he sensed the void already. "Hush now, little one," I murmured, lifting him gently, his warmth a fragile anchor against the chill seeping through the walls. Elias Harrington, third generation on this land, reduced to rocking a child while his wife dissolved into thin air. Father had laughed off the old tales. Every Harrington bride lost after birthing an heir, from grandfather's Sarah to Uncle Thomas's Mary, all chalked up to fever or flight or some convenient accident. But this? No fever burned Eliza's cheeks in those final hours. Her eyes had been clear, pleading as she pushed our boy into the world. I'd turned away for mere seconds to fetch water from the basin, and when I looked back, a knock rattled the door, sharp and insistent. I froze, one hand on the pistol tucked in my belt, the Colt Walker heavy as regret. "Who goes?" I called, voice rough from exhaustion. "It's Amos, sir." "From the fields." The overseer's tone was steady, but I heard the hesitation. I unbarred the door, letting in the humid night air laced with magnolia and distant rain. Amos stood there, hat in hand, his weathered face etched deeper by the lantern's glow. Tall and lean, he'd been with the family since I was a boy. Loyal, but wary of the shadows that clung to Harrington blood. "What do you know of this?" I demanded, stepping aside to let him in. The baby fussed again, and I shifted him to my shoulder, patting his back with a rhythm born of instinct, not experience. Amos's eyes darted to the empty bed, then away. "Heard the scream, sir. Thought it was just the birthing pains. But when the housegirl came running to the quarters saying Ms. Eliza was, well, gone." He trailed off, rubbing his jaw. "Folks are talking. Say the curse took her like the others." I slammed the locket onto the table, the clink echoing. "Curse? Damn your curses, Amos. Eliza didn't run off with some lover or drown in the river. She's vanished. From here." I gestured wildly at the room, the air still humming with her absence. "Help me search the grounds at first light. Every inch, the levee, the slave cabins, the woods. Someone saw something." He nodded slowly, but his gaze lingered on the cradle. "And the boy, sir? If the tales hold true, the Harrington heir brings more than luck. It brings the vanishing. I shot him a glare, but the words lodged in my throat like river silt. As he slipped out into the night, I sank into the rocker by the hearth, the baby finally quieting against my chest. The fire popped, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts on the walls. Sleep tugged at me, but I fought it, eyes fixed on the door. Whatever had taken Eliza, it wouldn't touch my son. Not while I drew breath. Dawn crept in gray fingers through the shutters, and with it, a resolve hardened in my veins. I'd unravel this nightmare, curse or no, even if it meant dredging the family's buried sins from the mud. The lantern's flame flickered as I knelt in the attic dust, my fingers tracing the faded ink on the yellowed journal. Elias Harrington, my great-uncle, or so the family tree claimed, had scrawled his confessions here page after frantic page, as if the words could ward off the shadow creeping through our bloodline. 3 wives gone, he wrote, each vanishing in the dead of night after their babes drew first breath. No screams, no traces, just empty cradles and echoes in the big house on the river bend. I slammed the book shut, heart pounding like a steamboat drum. If this curse was real, my own Eliza lay in peril downstairs, the midwife still wiping sweat from her brow after delivering our son just hours ago. I crept down the narrow stairs, the wood groaning under my boots, each creak a reminder of the house's age, built in 1792, when the Harringtons first planted cotton along the Mississippi's muddy banks. The air grew thicker, laced with the metallic tang of blood and the faint, sweet rot from the river outside. Eliza's room was at the end of the hall, door ajar, and I paused there listening. A soft coo from the bassinet, our boy, healthy, pink, oblivious. But Eliza, silence. Pushing the door open, I found her sitting up in bed, pale as moonlight on water, her dark hair unbound and spilling over the quilt. The midwife, old Mrs. Thibodeau, bustled about with linens, muttering prayers in Creole. She's weak, Monsieur Elias, but the Lord's grace held. Rest now, both of you. Eliza's eyes met mine, weary but sharp. The child's name, Joshua, as we said. He has your jaw stubborn already. Her voice was a thread, but it pulled me closer. I took her hand, cool and trembling, and felt the weight of it all. The plantation's debts mounting like floodwaters, the slaves whispering of ghosts in the fields, and now this damned family lore unearthed from the attic. I leaned in, voice low. I found Uncle Elias's journal. It's worse than tales around the fire. He lost them all the same way, poof, into thin air after birth. Swore it was a pact, something from the old country our grandfolks brought over. Her grip tightened. Superstition, Elias, we've got real troubles. That surveyor from Natchez sniffing around our land claim, saying the river's shift means half our acres are underwater come spring. Focus on that, not curses. But as she spoke, a chill slithered up my spine. The room's shadows seemed to deepen, pooling in the corners like spilled ink. I glanced at the window, shutters rattling faintly against the night breeze off the levee. No, not breeze, something heavier, like breath. Mrs. Thibodeau crossed herself and slipped out, leaving us alone with Joshua's soft gurgles. I paced to the hearth, poking at the embers to coax more light. Can't shake it, Eliza. The journal mentioned a locket, silver engraved with thorns. Said each wife wore it as a wedding gift passed down. You have one just like it from my mother. She touched her throat where the chain lay hidden under her nightgown. It's just jewelry. Burn that book if it poisons your mind. Before I could argue, a knock echoed from downstairs. Sharp, insistent, like knuckles on hollow cypress. Who'd venture out at this hour? The plantation hands knew better after dark, with gators prowling the bayous and fever ghosts said to wander. I grabbed the pistol from the mantel, its weight familiar from patrols against river pirates, and nodded to Eliza. Stay put. Bolt the door behind me. The stairs felt endless as I descended, lanterns swinging, casting wild shadows that danced like accusing fingers. At the bottom, the front door stood firm, but the knocking persisted. From the parlor window? No deeper, from the walls themselves? I froze, sweat beating despite the chill. Then a voice, muffled and urgent. Elias! It's me, Tom, your brother.
Open up, for God's sake, Tom!
He was supposed to be in Vicksburg, selling the last of our cotton to pay the bank. I unlatched the door, yanking it wide. There he stood, disheveled in mud-caked trousers, his face gaunt under the brim of his hat. No horse, no buggy, just him panting like he'd run the miles from town. What in blazes? I pulled him inside, bolting the door against the humid dark. Eliza just birthed our son. You hear about that? His eyes darted wild. That's why I'm here. Rode hard after the telegram from the midwife's boy. But it's not the birth, it's the curse. Saw it myself last night, Elias. In a dream or vision or whatever hell this is, a woman in white pulling at the river's edge. Our wives. They're not gone. They're taken. I stared, the pistol heavy in my fist. Taken? The journal's words clawed at me. The river claims its due. Outside, the Mississippi murmured, a low roar building like distant thunder. Joshua's cry pierced the air from upstairs, sharp and demanding. Whatever this was, it had found us now. No more denying the pull. The lantern's flame flickered as I knelt by the riverbank, the mud sucking at my boots like it wanted to claim me too. Elias had insisted we come here at dusk, swearing the water held secrets the daylight couldn't touch. But now, with the current whispering dark nothings, I wondered if he'd led us straight into madness. My hands trembled as I sifted through the silt, searching for any trace of Eliza's locket, the one she'd worn since our wedding day, vanished with her just hours after little Mary's cry pierced the night. Nothing, I muttered, wiping sweat from my brow. The air hung thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and every rustle in the underbrush made my pulse hammer. Elias crouched beside me, his face gaunt under the brim of his hat, eyes scanning the reeds like a man hunted. He'd been the one to find the first wife's shawl tangled in these same branches years ago, or so the family whispers went. Brave as he was, there was a caution in him now, a hesitation that spoke of too many losses. "Keep looking, Caleb," he said, voice low and steady, though his fingers clutched the pistol at his belt. "The curse don't hide its leavings easy. Remember what the old midwife said. After the birth they walk to the water drawn like moths." I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Eliza wasn't one to wander off, not with a newborn in her arms. She'd been laughing that morning, her hand on her belly, promising we'd break this Harrington chain together. Now the house echoed empty, and Mary wailed in the arms of the neighbor woman back in town. If we didn't find something, anything, I'd have to face the truth. Another wife gone, swallowed by whatever plagued our bloodline. A glint caught my eye amid the pebbles, half buried in the shallows. Heart pounding, I reached in, the cold water shocking my skin. My fingers closed around cold metal. The locket. I pulled it free, chains dripping, and flipped it open. Inside, a curl of Eliza's auburn hair still tied with the blue ribbon I'd given her, but scratched into the gold backing, fresh as if done by a knife. "Forgive me." Elias leaned in, his breath catching. "She left this. Willingly." I couldn't answer. The inscription burned in my mind, a betrayal sharper than any disappearance. If Eliza had chosen the river, what did that mean for us, for Mary? The stakes twisted tighter. This wasn't just loss. It was a choice echoing through generations. We had to get back, confront the family ledger hidden in the attic, the one grandfather burned half of before his own wife vanished. But as thunder rumbled overhead, promising a storm to flood the banks, I realized the real hazard wasn't the water. It was the secrets we'd unearthed, pulling us under together. We trudged back through the gathering dark, the locket heavy in my pocket like a stone. Elias argued we should ride for the doctor in Natchez, get a second opinion on the birth, but I shot him down. Too many miles, too much time. "No," I said, mounting my horse with a grit that surprised even me. "We face this at home. Mary's waiting, and so's the truth." The trail wound narrow, branches snagging at our coats, and halfway up the ridge Elias's horse stumbled, throwing him into the brush. He cursed, scrambling up with a twisted ankle, but his wit cut through the pain. If the curse takes wives, maybe it's jealous of us bachelors sticking together. I forced a laugh, helping him remount, but inside, the camaraderie felt fragile, like the first crack in a dam. By the time we reached the Harrington homestead, rain lashed the roof like accusations. I burst through the door, Mary in the neighbor's arms quieting at my voice. But as I held her close, the locket's weight reminded me. Triumph here meant adaptation, not escape. We'd burn the ledger if we had to, rewrite the family story with ink and resolve. Yet staring at the nursery window fogged by the storm, I knew the cost lingered, a shadow on every birth to come. The lantern's flame guttered in the humid night air as I crouched behind the overgrown azalea bush, my heart pounding like a drum in some forbidden ritual. Elias Harrington's plantation house loomed just beyond, its white columns ghostly under the moon. But it wasn't the building that chilled me. It was the faint, rhythmic creak from the upstairs window, like a cradle rocking on its own. I'd come this far, slipping past the overseer's dogs and the patrollers, because Jedediah's whispers in the tavern had painted too vivid a picture. Another wife gone, Vanished clean after birthing a stillborn son, leaving behind only a bloodied sheet and a husband's hollow stare. My fingers tightened on the pistol grip, the metal warm from my sweat-slicked palm. If the curse was real, tonight I'd prove it or die trying. I waited, breath shallow, until the creak stopped. The house fell silent save for the distant hoot of an owl mocking my nerve. Jedediah, my brother-in-law and the only soul who'd believed my suspicions about the Harrington line, had sworn this was the night to watch. The widow's vigil, they called it when the spirits supposedly came calling. He was back at the cabin nursing his lame leg from the war, but his words echoed in my head. Go, Caleb, for Eliza. If it's taken her kind before, it'll take the next unless you end it. Eliza, my own wife, lost 2 years back in childbirth, her body never found. Just whispers of shadows in the mist along the river. I'd buried an empty coffin and drowned the grief in whiskey until Jedediah dragged me sober, pointing me toward the Harringtons as the root of it all. Edging forward, I kept low, the gravel path biting into my knees through my trousers. The side door to the kitchen hung ajar, careless or a trap. I eased it open, the hinges sighing like a dying breath. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of lye soap and something sharper, metallic like fresh spilled blood. My boots scuffed softly on the worn pine floor as I moved toward the stairs, pistol drawn now, hammer thumbed back. Up above, a floorboard groaned and I froze, pulse thundering in my ears. Voices? No, just the wind, or so I told myself. But then a shadow flickered at the top of the landing, tall and elongated, not quite human. I took the steps 2 at a time, silent as I could manage, the wood protesting under my weight. The hallway stretched dark and narrow, doors lining either side like judgmental eyes. The creaking had come from the end room, the nursery, or what passed for one in this cursed house. Hand on the knob, I listened. Nothing now, but the air felt heavier, charged, as if the walls themselves held their breath. I pushed in, the door swinging wide. The room was a tomb of lace and faded wallpaper, a single candle burning low on the mantel. In the center stood the cradle, empty, its rockers still, but on the floor a dark stain spread across the planks, glistening wet. My stomach twisted, blood fresh enough to pool. And there, slumped against the wall, was Mrs. Harrington herself, or what was left of her intent, pale as moonlight, eyes wide and unblinking, a quilt clutched in her lap. She wasn't vanished, not yet, but her lips moved in silent prayer or plea. Who? She rasped, spotting me, her voice a threadbare whisper. Caleb Thorne, I said, holstering the pistol to kneel beside her, though every instinct screamed to run. Heard tell of your trouble. The curse, it's taken enough. What happened here? Her hand trembled as she pointed to the window, where the curtains billowed like ghosts. It came after the babe. Black as sin whispering my name. Took the child first, then pulled me toward the river in my mind. I fought, but... She coughed, a wet rattle, and slumped further. No time for gentle words. I scooped her up light as a child and bolted for the stairs, her head lolling against my shoulder. Outside, the night pressed in, cicadas screaming a warning. I made for the tree line, her weight nothing compared to the fear clawing my gut. Footsteps pounded behind. Harrington himself roused, his bellow cutting the dark. Thief! Murderer! A shot cracked, splintering bark near my ear. I dove into the underbrush, Mrs. Harrington moaning softly, and pushed deeper into the swamp, the river's murmur guiding me like a siren's call. Jedediah would be waiting at the old fisherman's shack, but now we had a witness. A survivor, maybe, and the curse's face glimpsed in shadow. If it pulled toward the water, that's where I'd hunt it next, before it claimed her fully or dragged me under too. Dawn crept gray through the cypress knees as I burst into the shack, kicking the door wide. Jedediah jerked upright from his pallet, rifle in hand, his face gaunt in the half-light. Caleb, what in God's name? Help me! I gasped, laying her on the rough table. She stirred, eyes fluttering, but the stain on her nightgown had spread, dark and insistent. Jedediah's eyes widened at the sight, his caution warring with the grit that had kept us both alive through worse. The Harrington woman. She's seen it. The thing behind the vanishings. He lit the lantern, muttering prayers under his breath, and fetched water and bandages from his kit. As we worked to staunch the bleeding, not from a wound. The lantern's flame flickered as I pushed through the tangled underbrush, the Mississippi humidity clinging to my skin like a second shirt. Elias Harrington gripped his rifle tighter, his knuckles white against the worn stock, eyes darting to every shadow in the cypress grove. We'd been tracking the whispers of the curse for days now, ever since that frantic letter from his sister-in-law, but tonight felt different. Thicker, like the air itself was holding its breath. "You hear that?" he muttered, voice low and edged with the drawl of these bayou folk. I nodded, straining my ears over the distant croak of frogs. A soft rustle, not wind, not animal, something deliberate circling us. My boot sank into the mud with a suck that echoed too loudly, and I cursed under my breath, pulling free with a grimace. Elias shot me a look, half warning, half amused, but there was no time for his usual ribbing about us city folk from up north. We'd come this far on rumors. The Harrington men, generation after generation, losing their wives to thin air right after the babe's first cry. No bodies, no traces, just empty cradles and widowers haunted by what-ifs. Elias swore it was no curse, but the fear in his eyes said otherwise. As we crested the low rise overlooking the old family plot, the moon broke through the clouds, silvering the weathered stones. There, amid the graves, stood a figure, slight, draped in a shawl that billowed like mist. "Stay back," I whispered, my hand instinctively going to the revolver at my hip. Heart pounding, I stepped forward, the ground soft and treacherous underfoot. The figure turned, slow as a door creaking on rusted hinges, and in the dim light I made out the face. Not a ghost, but Widow Landry, the midwife who'd attended every Harrington birth for decades. Her eyes, sharp as flint, fixed on us. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice carrying over the still night like a warning bell. Elias froze beside me, rifle half raised. "Auntie May? What in God's name?" She didn't flinch, just clutched a small bundle to her chest, a swaddled something that let out a faint mewling cry. My stomach twisted. Another Harrington? But the dates didn't add up. The last vanishing was years ago. "The river takes what it claims," she murmured, stepping closer, the bundle wriggling in her arms. I caught a glimpse then, through the folds of cloth, not an infant but a doll stitched from burlap and bone, its eyes sewn shut with black thread. Elias let out a strangled gasp, lowering his weapon. That's from Mama's time, how—" Before I could process it, the wind picked up, whipping branches against the stones, and Widow Landry's form blurred at the edges, like smoke dissolving. I lunged forward, grabbing for her arm, but my fingers closed on empty air. She was gone, the doll tumbling to the mud at our feet. Elias dropped to his knees, scooping it up with trembling hands. "This ain't right," he breathed, turning it over. Etched into the burlap was a name. Eliza Harrington, his own mother, vanished in 32. The curse wasn't just taking wives. It was unraveling the past, pulling threads from the grave. We backed away from the plot, the night closing in, but the rustle returned, closer now, from the direction of the river. My mind raced. Ingenuity be damned, this was no riddle for clever traps or Yankee grit. It was something older, hungrier. "We need to get to the house," I said, voice steady despite the chill racing down my spine. Elias nodded, clutching the doll like a talisman. But as we turned, a low moan rose from the waters, calling names we both knew too well. The stakes had shifted. It wasn't just about stopping the vanishings anymore. It was about surviving the night with our own histories intact. The lantern's flame flickered as I knelt in the damp earth of the Harrington family plot, the spade biting into the soil with a reluctant crunch. Eliza's grave, supposedly hers anyway, lay unmarked save for a crude stone etched with her name and the year of our child's birth. 3 months gone, and still no body to mourn. My hands trembled not from the chill night air, but from the whisper of doubt that had gnawed at me since the midwife's frantic knock that dawn. I glanced over my shoulder at Josiah, my brother's shadow hulking against the moonlit oaks. He clutched the Bible like a shield, his face gaunt under the brim of his hat. "This is blasphemy, Elias," he muttered, voice low as the river's murmur beyond the levee. "Disturbing the dead won't bring her back. The curse takes what it will." "Curse or no," I shot back, driving the spade deeper, "I'm finding proof. Folks say she vanished clean away, but graves don't lie empty forever." Sweat beaded on my brow despite the autumn bite. The air hung heavy with the scent of turned loam and distant magnolia. Josiah had always been the cautious one, quoting scripture to steady his nerves while I chased shadows with a farmer's grit. Tonight those shadows felt alive, coiling around the roots like the Mississippi's hidden currents. The first clink of metal on something unyielding halted me mid-swing. I scraped away the dirt, revealing not bone but a rusted iron box no bigger than a man's boot, wedged beneath the stone. Josiah sucked in a breath, crossing himself despite his Protestant leanings. I pried it open with shaking fingers, the hinges screeching like a banshee's wail. Inside lay a locket, gold, tarnished with a miniature portrait of a woman who wasn't Eliza. Her eyes stared out, fierce and familiar, framed by dark curls. Beneath it a folded letter, brittle as old leaves. My heart pounded as I unfolded it, the words blurring in the lantern's glow. To the next Harrington bride, heed the river's call, or join the vanished. The blood demands its due, E. Harrington, 1823. Josiah leaned in, his breath ragged. Elizabeth? Our great-aunt? She wrote this before she disappeared too. The pieces clicked like a poorly oiled lock. Every wife, every birth, every midnight vanishing since grandfather's time. Not ghosts, but a pattern, etched in ink and blood. A twig snapped in the underbrush, sharp as a gunshot. We froze, the lantern swinging wild shadows across the graves. Who's there? I called, voice steadier than I felt, grabbing the spade like a club. The night pressed in, thick with unseen eyes, and for the first time the curse felt less like legend and more like a hunter closing its jaws. From the darkness a figure emerged, not spectral, but flesh and bone. Widow Hargrove, the midwife who'd delivered our son, her shawl clutched tight against the wind. Her eyes darted to the open box, widening in recognition. Fools, she hissed, stepping closer, her boots silent on the dew-slick grass. You've stirred what should stay buried. The river don't give back what's hers. I rose slowly, the letter crumpling in my fist. You knew. All this time delivering babes and watching 'em fade. You knew about the locket? Josiah edged back, murmuring prayers, but I held my ground. The weight of Eliza's absence fueling a fire in my chest. She laughed, a dry, bitter sound like leaves in the gale. New child, I was born to it. My own mother vanished, same as yours, Elias. The Harrington men sire strong sons, but the wives, we pay the toll. Her gaze flicked to the river, black and endless under the stars. That box ain't the end. It's a warning. Follow it, or lose more than a wife. The implication hung between us, heavier than the humid air. Our boy, barely weaned, slept miles away in the cabin, vulnerable, marked by the same blood. Josiah gripped my arm, his caution cracking into urgency. We burn it. End this now. But as I stared at the portrait, a resolve hardened in me. No more running from whispers. We'd trace this thread back to its source, damn the consequences. The widow's warning echoed as she melted back into the night, leaving us with the box and a dawn that promised no mercy. The lantern's flame sputtered in the damp air of the root cellar, casting jagged shadows that danced like accusations across the dirt walls. I gripped the rusted iron key tighter in my fist, my knuckles whitening as I jammed it into the lock of the old sea chest Elias Harrington had buried here decades ago. The mechanism groaned in protest, but it gave way with a click that echoed too loudly in the confined space. My heart hammered. What if this was just another dead end, another layer of lies from a family rotting from the inside? Inside the chest lay a bundle of yellowed letters, tied with faded ribbon, and beneath them a small leather-bound journal, its cover cracked like parched earth. I snatched the journal first, flipping it open to pages filled with a spidery hand that matched Elias's signature on the plantation ledgers. The blood calls to the river, the first entry read, dated 1823. She whispered it before the child came, and then she was gone, swallowed by the mist at dawn. Not fever, not flight, something older, hungrier. I traced the words with my thumb, the ink smudged in places as if tears had fallen there. My own wife, Clara, had vanished the same way just last spring, after our son drew his first breath. The doctor called it postpartum delusion. The preacher, divine judgment, but I'd seen the fear in her eyes, the way she clutched at the locket around her neck, murmuring about a debt unpaid. Footsteps thudded above, heavy and deliberate. Pa's boots, no doubt, come to drag me back to the harvest. I shoved the journal into my coat pocket and rifled through the letters, scanning frantic scrawls from Elias's first wife. The midwife knows. She bears the mark, same as me. We trade our lives for the air, or the curse claims us both. The mark. A crescent scar on the inner wrist, like the one I'd found on Clara's body when it washed up on the riverbank, bloated and pale. Not vanished then, but delivered to the Mississippi's muddy embrace. My stomach twisted. This wasn't some spectral nonsense. It was a pattern, a ritual hidden in plain sight. The trapdoor creaked open, spilling a moonlight down the ladder. Boy, you down there meddling again? Pa's voice boomed, laced with that familiar edge of warning. He descended rung by rung, his lantern swinging like a pendulum. I stood, forcing calm into my limbs, the letters clutched behind my back. He was the last Harrington standing who'd known Elias firsthand, but prying answers from him was like pulling teeth from a gator, messy and likely to bite back. "Just settling some old debts, Pa," I said, keeping my tone light though my pulse raced. He eyed the open chest, his face hardening into that weathered mask he wore since Ma disappeared after my birth. 28 years and he'd never spoken her name. Some debts ain't meant to be settled. He stepped closer, close enough I smelled the whiskey on his breath. Elias learned that the hard way, buried his secrets for a reason. I met his gaze, the journal burning against my chest. Like sending wives to the river? Or the midwife who helps with the births? The words hung between us, sharp as a switchblade. His eyes widened a fraction, then narrowed to slits. "You think you're the first to dig?" He grabbed my arm, his grip iron from years of wrangling cotton fields. "The curse ain't a story, son. It's a bargain. The land's fertile 'cause of it. Harrington blood for bountiful yields. Break it and we all starve." I wrenched free, the letters spilling to the dirt. One fluttered open at his feet. A plea from Elias's sister dated 1840, begging him to end the cycle before the next birth. Pa's face drained of color as he read it. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. Real, raw doubt. She was the last one who tried," he muttered, stooping to pick it up. "Vanished same as the rest." "Then help me stop it," I pressed, my voice low and urgent. "Clara's gone. My boy's next if I marry again. We end this tonight. Find that midwife, make her talk." He hesitated, the lantern trembling in his hand. Outside, the river murmured a low warning in the night. Pa nodded once, slowly, the weight of generations cracking in that moment. "All right, but if the mark finds us first?" He trailed off, tucking the letter into his pocket. Together we climbed out, the cellar door slamming shut behind us like a coffin lid. The path to Widow Hale's cabin wound through the cypress groves, the air thick with the buzz of night insects and the faint rot of standing water. My boots sank into the mud with each step, but I pushed on, the journal's secrets fueling me. Pa trailed silent, shotgun slung over his shoulder. Not for show, but loaded with salt rounds, old wives' tales be damned. We'd confront her at dawn when the mist rose thickest and drag the truth from her if we had to. But as the cabin's silhouette emerged from the fog, a child's cry pierced the quiet, high and desperate, like our son's had been that fateful night. My blood ran cold. Was this another birth, another vanishing waiting to happen? The lantern's flame sputtered in the damp cellar air, casting jagged shadows across the rows of dusty jars. I gripped the edge of the scarred oak table, my knuckles whitening as Elias leaned in closer, his breath ragged against my ear. "Look here, Caleb," he whispered, his voice a gravelly thread in the silence. "This ain't no ghost story. It's poison, slow like the river claims a body after a storm." I swallowed hard, the metallic tang of fear mixing with the moldy scent clinging to everything down here. Elias, ever the cautious one, had dragged me into the Harrington estate's underbelly just after midnight, insisting we search the late doctor's hidden stores before the sheriff could seal them off. My mind raced back to Eliza's final hours, her skin pale as moonlight, whispering of shadows in her eyes before she slipped away. No, vanished, like the others. 5 wives now, each gone after birthing a Harrington heir, leaving nothing but echoes and empty cradles. The town called it a curse, but Elias, with his sharp wit honed from years doctoring steamboat crews, saw patterns where I saw phantoms. He pried open a small unmarked vial, tilting it so the viscous liquid caught the light, a sickly amber that swirled like trapped smoke. "Belladonna extract mixed with something worse," he muttered, corking it quick and tucking it into his satchel. "Diluted just enough to mimic fever. Administered in tonics, maybe during labor." Who had access? The midwife? Or closer? My heart pounded like a paddle wheel against the current. I'd trusted Doc Harlan, the family physician who'd attended every birth, his folksy assurances a balm amid the grief. But now, staring at the shelf of identical vials, I saw the lie etched in the dust-free spots where others had been taken. If it's him or was, why? The Harrington name's cursed enough without this devilry. I glanced toward the cellar stairs, half expecting booted feet to descend, the rival lumber barons who'd long eyed our land circling like vultures. Elias straightened, his wiry frame tense, eyes darting to the shadows. "Greed, Caleb. Your pa's will leaves the plantation split among the sons, but only if the line holds. Wives vanishing? Keeps the heirs legitimate, no questions from outsiders. But Eliza, she confided in me about Harlan's special remedies. We confront him at dawn before he bolts. A floorboard creaked above, sharp as a gunshot in the night. I froze, hand instinctively reaching for the pistol tucked in my belt. Footsteps, deliberate, unhurried, echoed down the hall. Elias doused the lantern with a swift breath, plunging us into black. My pulse thrummed in my ears. This wasn't the plan. We'd slip out quiet, gather proof, not stumble into a trap. But as the door at the top hinges groaned open, a sliver of moonlight spilling down like an accusation, I realized dawn might come too late for truths, or for us. The lantern's flame guttered in the humid night air, casting jagged shadows across the warped floorboards of the old Harrington attic. I clutched the frayed journal tighter, my knuckles white against the leather as Eliza's whisper cut through the silence like a knife. Elias, look, it's her handwriting. But this date, it's from tomorrow. My heart hammered, the words blurring before me. The attic smelled of dust and forgotten secrets, the kind that clung to your skin like river mud. Eliza, always the bold one, her dark curls escaping her bonnet, leaned closer, her finger tracing the ink that shouldn't exist. We'd come up here after the midwife's frantic warning, chasing rumors of the curse that had claimed my mother, my grandmother. Every Harrington wife vanishing into the Delta's mists right after their babes drew breath. Now with my own wife, Clara, heavy with child and feverish below, this journal felt like a noose tightening. Impossible, I muttered, but my voice cracked. The page detailed a birth under a blood moon, the child born with eyes like polished obsidian, and then the vanishing. Not just gone, but pulled, the words said, by hands from the river itself. Eliza's hand found mine, steady despite the tremor I felt in her grip. She was my cousin, the only family left with spine enough to stand by me through the whispers in town. The accusations of witchcraft that followed our bloodline like hounds. We'd planned to burn the place at dawn, and the cycle with fire before Clara's time came. But this? A prophecy scrawled in Clara's own looping script? I slammed the journal shut, the thud echoing like a coffin lid. We tell no one. Not yet. Downstairs the floor creaked, footsteps heavy and deliberate, not Clara's light tread. Eliza's eyes widened, and she drew the small pistol from her skirt, the one she'd taken from her father's study after he drank himself to ruin. The attic door rattled, then burst open. In the doorway stood Reverend Hale, his face gaunt in the lantern light, Bible clutched like a weapon. He'd been hounding us for weeks, preaching salvation from the curse, but his eyes now held something feral, unhinged. The river calls its due, Elias Harrington. Your blood knows it. Behind him, 2 men from the parish, roughnecks with shotguns, flanked like shadows. The challenge we'd ignored. The town's growing fear turning to action. A rival zealotry that saw our family's tragedy as devil's work. I shoved Eliza behind a stack of crates, the wood splintering under my palm. You come for exorcism or execution? My voice steadied, drawing on the grit Pa had drilled into me during those long nights poling the barge. Hale stepped forward, his boots thudding. Both. The child must not draw breath. The first shot rang out from one of the men, splintering the beam above my head. I lunged, tackling Hale to the floor, the Bible skittering away. His fists connected with my ribs, breath hot and sour against my ear. The curse is you, boy, your seed poisons the womb. Pain bloomed, but I drove my knee into his gut, rolling free as Eliza fired. The crack echoed, and one roughneck crumpled, clutching his thigh. The other charged, shotgun swinging like a club. Eliza dodged, but he caught her arm, twisting until she cried out. Fury surged through me, Clara below, vulnerable, and now this. I grabbed a rusted lantern hook from the wall, swinging it wide. It connected with a sickening crunch against his skull, dropping him like a felled oak. Hale scrambled up, fumbling for a knife at his belt. But Eliza was faster, pressing her pistol to his temple. Enough, she gasped, blood trickling from a split lip. The river takes what it wants. You meddle, you join them. Hale's eyes darted, defiance crumbling to fear. He spat. You'll doom us all. But back toward the stairs, hands raised. We bound the men with ropes from the rafters, their groans a grim underscore to the night's tension. As Hale fled into the dark, I knelt by Eliza, helping her staunch the flow from her arm. That plan to burn, it failed before it started. Now the whole town's riled. She nodded, wincing, her wit shining through the pain. Then we adapt. Take the journal to the levee at first light. Face the river's truth before it faces us. Dawn crept in, gray and unforgiving as we descended. Clara stirred in her bed, murmuring my name, oblivious to the blood on our hands. The curse loomed larger now. Not just a family ghost, but a town's noose. And in my gut I knew. The vanishing wasn't escape, it was judgment waiting for the babe's cry. The lantern's flame guttered as I slammed the attic door behind me, my boots thudding against the warped floorboards. Dust motes swirled like angry spirits in the dim light, and I could hear Elias's labored breathing from the shadows. Too close, too ragged. He'd followed me up here, the fool clutching that rusted lantern like it was his last hope. "Jed, wait," he gasped, his voice a wheeze that cut through the stale air. "You can't just—" I spun on him, my hand instinctively going to the pistol at my belt. The weight of it grounded me, even as my mind raced with what I'd just uncovered in the family Bible downstairs. Not a curse from some voodoo hex, but a pattern of poisonings hidden in the margins, scripted in my grandfather's hand. Every wife, dosed with nightshade extract after delivery, vanished into the river mud to cover the Harrington sins. And now with Clara heavy with child, the weight of it all pressed like the humid Mississippi night outside. Elias staggered forward, his face pale as the moonlight filtering through the cracked window. He was my cousin, always the cautious one, the one who'd urged me to flee this rotting plantation rather than dig into the past. But curiosity had hooked us both, and now it was reeling us in. "The ledgers," he said, eyes wide. "They match the dates. Your pa, my uncle, he did it to protect the land, the legacy. Said the women were barren or weak. But it was the arsenic in the soil making the heirs sickly. He couldn't risk losing it all." I gripped the Bible tighter, its leather cover slick with sweat. The attic smelled of mildew and old regrets. Crates of forgotten Harrington finery stacked like tombstones around us. Outside, the river lapped at the banks, whispering secrets it had swallowed for generations. Clara was downstairs resting after the midwife's visit, oblivious to the storm brewing. If Elias was right, and God help me, the evidence screamed it, then the curse was a lie to bury the truth. But who had set it in motion this time? Not me, I'd sworn to end it. A floorboard creaked below, sharp and deliberate. We both froze. Elias's hand trembled on the lantern, casting jittery shadows that danced across the rafters. "That's not the wind," I muttered, drawing the pistol with a soft click. My heart pounded, each beat echoing the urgency I'd felt since finding the first wife's locket in the root cellar, engraved with a plea: "Save the child." We crept to the hatch, the air thick with tension. I went first, easing it open just enough to peer down the narrow stairs. The hallway below was empty, but a sliver of light spilled from Clara's room where the door hung ajar. Voices murmured, low, urgent. One was the midwife's, her tone laced with something sharper than concern. The other? I didn't recognize, but it carried the drawl of a man who'd ridden in from Natchez yesterday, claiming to be a distant kin. Elias tapped my shoulder, his whisper hot against my ear. "We confront them now, or we lose her like the rest." His eyes, usually so steady, flickered with the grit I'd only seen in him once before, when we'd pulled that drowned slave from the current last harvest. Brave in fragments, that's what he was. I nodded, holstering the pistol but keeping my knife handy. Descending felt like stepping into the jaws of the beast, each creak a potential betrayal. As we reached the landing, the voices sharpened. "The boy's onto something," the stranger said. "We dose her tonight, blame the curse. The land stays ours." Clara's gasp cut through, muffled but real. My blood turned to fire. I kicked the door wide, the wood splintering against the frame. The midwife spun, her vial glinting in the candlelight, while the stranger reached for his coat, where a bulge suggested more than tobacco. "Jed!" Clara cried from the bed, her face ashen, one hand on her swollen belly. Elias lunged for the midwife, tackling her to the floorboards with a thud that shook the walls. I charged the stranger, my fist connecting with his jaw before he could draw. He staggered, spitting blood, but swung back with a haymaker that grazed my temple. Stars burst in my vision, the room tilting like the river in flood. "Stop!" Clara's voice cracked like thunder. She was on her feet somehow, clutching a candlestick like a weapon. "This ends now. No more ghosts." The stranger laughed, wiping his mouth. "The Harrington curse ain't done with you yet, boy." But as Elias pinned the midwife, wrenching the vial free, I saw the fear in his eyes, the realization that the legacy we'd chased was crumbling. We bound them with bedsheets, the night stretching into accusations and confessions. The midwife cracked first, sobbing about debts to the stranger, a land speculator who'd promised her a cut if the Harrington line ended heirless. Clara, pale but fierce, demanded the full truth. How many wives, how deep the poison ran. Elias tallied it in his head, his cautious mind already plotting the sheriff's involvement come dawn. As the first light crept over the levee, I sat by Clara, her hand in mine, the Bible open between us. The curse was broken, but the scars, the vanished women, the tainted soil, lingered like the river's fog. We'd sell the land, start fresh, but the weight of those choices pressed on. A reminder that some inheritances you can't outrun. The lantern's flame flickered low as I crouched behind the splintered oak, my breath ragged in the humid night. Elias gripped his rifle tighter, his knuckles white against the dark wood, while Widow Hargrove whispered prayers that sounded more like curses. We'd tracked the shadow through the Harrington plantation's overgrown fields for hours, ever since the birthing scream echoed from the old manor. Another wife gone, vanished like smoke after delivering her babe. But this time we weren't running. We were hunting the thing that took them. "Quiet now," Elias hissed, his cautious eyes scanning the mist rolling off the river. He was always the steady one, the freedman who'd lost his own kin to yellow fever years back, making him wary of any unnatural chill. I nodded, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Brave words in the daylight tavern don't hold up when the curse feels alive, slithering closer. The widow clutched her locket, the one with her sister's faded portrait inside. She'd come from Natchez swearing to end this, her wit sharp as a switchblade despite the grief-etching lines around her mouth. A twig snapped ahead, sharp as a gunshot in the silence. We froze. From the manor's crumbling porch, a figure emerged. Not the spectral hag the old folks whispered of, but a man, gaunt and wild-eyed, cradling a squalling infant wrapped in bloodied linens. Harrington himself, or what was left of him after a dozen losses. His latest wife, poor Eliza from the riverboats, had birthed the boy at dusk, and by midnight, she was gone, swallowed by the walls, they said. Just like the others since 41. He staggered toward the riverbank, muttering feverishly, the baby's cries cutting through the fog. "Not again. Not my bloodline's end." Elias shifted, ready to call out, but I grabbed his arm. Something moved in the shadows behind Harrington, a ripple like heat off a stove, but colder, twisting the air. The curse wasn't a ghost. We'd pieced that much from the ledgers smuggled out by a house slave before she fled. It was the land itself, poisoned by some forgotten sin. Harrington's grandpappy burying bodies in the fields to hide debts, or worse, experiments with roots and tonics that twisted life into something vengeful. Our plan from the hollow, circle the manor, trap whatever emerged, had backfired at the first scream. The widow's lantern had drawn patrols, forcing us into the brush, and now here we were, exposed. "We take the child," I whispered, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing my gut. "It's the key. The wives vanished to feed it. Keep the line cursed." Elias shook his head, his grit showing in the set of his jaw. "And if it's him pulling strings? Man's worse than any spirit." The widow stepped forward first, her dress snagging on thorns she ignored. "Give me the boy, Jeremiah," she called, voice earnest, no tremor. Harrington whirled, eyes widening in the lantern's glow. "You, come to gloat like the rest?" He clutched the infant closer, backing toward the water where cypress knees jutted like broken fingers. We advanced, rifles low but ready. The ripple grew, coiling around his ankles. Vines? No, shadows thickening, pulling at him like quicksand. The baby wailed louder, and I saw it then. A faint glow in its tiny fists, pulsing like fireflies in a jar. Elias fired a warning shot into the dirt, the crack splitting the night. Harrington stumbled, dropping to one knee, the curse manifesting as tendrils of mist that lashed out, stinging my skin like nettles. I lunged, grabbing the child from his arms as the widow tackled him down. Elias covered us, shouting, "Run for the boat!" But the mist surged, wrapping the widow's legs, dragging her back. She kicked free, her wit flashing even now. "It's the river. Flush the poison." We bolted, me cradling the babe who quieted against my chest. Its warmth a stark contrast to the chill chasing us. Harrington's screams faded behind as we hit the dock, the skiff rocking under our weight. The mist halted at the water's edge, receding like a tide. But as we pulled into the current, the child stirred, its eyes opening, clear, untainted. We'd broken the hold maybe, but the manor loomed dark on the bank, and I knew the cost. Elias's limp from a thorn gash, the widow's haunted stare. The curse might sleep, but Harrington's blood ran deep in that soil. We'd saved one life, but the river carried whispers of more to come. The lantern's flame flickered like a dying heartbeat as I crouched in the shadowed corner of the Harrington attic, the air thick with dust, and the faint, metallic tang of old blood. Eliza's labored breaths echoed from the birthing room below, each one a knife twist in my gut. My wife, carrying our child, on the brink of whatever hell had claimed the others. I'd searched every crevice of this crumbling Mississippi plantation for answers, from the warped floorboards hiding yellowed letters to the locked trunk spilling secrets of madness and betrayal. But now, with the storm raging outside and Doc Harlan's shouts rising through the floor, I clutched the rusted locket in my palm, its engraved initials, E.H. For Elias Harrington, the first cursed husband, burning against my skin like a brand. I couldn't wait any longer. The curse wasn't some ghost or voodoo hex, no matter what the town whispered. It was uglier, forged in human greed and lies. Elias's journals, pieced together over weeks of fevered reading, painted it clear. He'd buried his fortune in the riverbank after his wife's vanishing, marking the spot with that locket to torment his kin. Every Harrington bride after birthed in agony, only for jealous midwives or kin, hell, maybe even Elias's own blood, to stage the disappearance for a cut of the gold. My own cousin Jeb had confessed it all last night in the barn, his face pale under the noose I'd prepared, but not before swearing Eliza was next, the final key to unearthing the hoard. Creeping down the narrow stairs, I dodged the creaking third step, heart pounding like a war drum. The house groaned under the wind's assault, rain lashing the windows as if the Mississippi itself conspired against us. In the hallway, shadows danced from the candlelight spilling from the birthing room door, where Aunt Miriam, Jeb's mother, the venomous heart of it, hovered over Eliza like a vulture. She'd been the one for generations, dosing the women with laudanum-laced tonics to mimic death, then spiriting them away to some hidden shack downstream, alive but broken, while the husbands went mad with grief. Miriam's eyes met mine through the crack in the door, cold and calculating, a scalpel glinting in her hand. "Eliza," I whispered, bursting in, the locket chain swinging like a pendulum. She lay on the sweat-soaked bed, hair matted, eyes half-lidded in pain, but alive, thank God, alive. Doc Harlan spun toward me, his mustache twitching in confusion, but Miriam was faster, lunging with a snarl that bared her teeth like a cornered animal. I sidestepped, grabbing her wrist, the scalpel clattering to the floorboards. "It's over, Miriam. Jeb told me everything. The gold, the bodies you never buried, just hid to keep the lie going." She twisted free, spitting curses that curdled the air. "Fool boy. That treasure's ours by blood, not yours. Elias meant it for the family, not some outsider like her." Her finger jabbed at Eliza, who gasped, clutching her belly as another contraction hit. Harlan dropped to his knees beside the bed, muttering prayers, his hands steadying Eliza's shoulders. But Miriam wasn't done. She scrambled for a vial on the side table, the same poison she'd used on the others, its contents swirling like serpent venom. I tackled her before she could uncork it, our bodies crashing into the dresser, vials shattering in a spray of glass and liquid that stung my eyes. The room spun, shouts, thunder, Eliza's cries blending into chaos. Pinning Miriam down, I pressed the locket to her throat, its edges drawing a thin line of blood. "Where are they? The wives? Tell me, or I'll drag you to the river myself and let the gators sort the truth." Her laugh was bitter, ragged, eyes gleaming with defiance even as her strength waned. "Downstream in the old boathouse, chained like dogs waiting for the next fool to claim the gold. But you'll never find it without the map Elias scratched inside this bauble." She clawed at my hand, nails raking my skin, but I held firm, flipping the locket open. There, etched faint on the inner gold, coordinates to the river's bend, a twisted tree as marker. Eliza's scream pierced the fray, sharp and urgent. I released Miriam, shoving her toward Harlan, who bound her wrists with his belt while she thrashed and wailed. Kneeling by Eliza, I took her hand, slick with sweat, her grip fierce despite the pain. "Hold on, love. It's ending, the curse, all of it. Just breathe with me." Her eyes locked on mine, trust flickering through the haze, and in that moment, with the storm howling and the house secrets crumbling, I felt the weight of generations lift, if only for a breath. But as the first wail of our child cut the air, strong, unyielding, Miriam's voice slithered from the corner, low and venomous. "You think it's over? The gold's cursed too, boy. Dig it up and you'll vanish next." Harlan glanced at me, doubt shadowing his face, but I ignored it, wrapping the newborn in a blanket, the locket now heavy in my pocket like a promise. We'd face the river at dawn, free the women, claim what was ours, or burn it all to ash. Either way, the Harrington name ended tonight. Not in whispers of ghosts, but in the grit of survival. The lantern's flame flickered as I shoved open the attic door, the hinges screaming like a banshee in the dead of night. Dust motes swirled in the beam, and there she was, Elias Harrington's latest wife, pale as moonlight, huddled in the corner amid stacks of yellowed ledgers and forgotten cradles. Her eyes wide with terror locked onto mine, but it wasn't fear of me. It was the shadow behind her, the one that had claimed the others. "Stay back, Jeremiah," she whispered, her voice cracking like dry riverbed. Her hands clutched a swaddled bundle to her chest, the newborn still slick from birth, its cries muffled against her nightgown. I'd tracked the curse through 3 graves and a dozen lies, from the cotton fields to this crumbling plantation house, and now it ended here, in the heart of the Harrington rot. I didn't listen. My boots thudded on the warped floorboards as I crossed the room, revolver heavy in my holster but unfired. Elias had sworn the vanishings were swamp fever or gypsy hexes, but I'd seen the patterns. Every wife gone hours after delivery, bodies never found, and Harrington richer each time, his ledgers hiding land grabs from widowed estates. No supernatural curse, just a man who'd turned grief into greed, staging disappearances to claim inheritances and silence rivals. The shadow shifted, resolving into Elias himself, his silhouette gaunt against the slatted window. He held a chloroform rag in one hand, the other gripping a knife that glinted like a serpent's tooth. "You meddlin' Yankee," he snarled, his Mississippi drawl thick with venom. "This ain't your affair. The family's tainted, every Harrington bride taken by the devil's own hand. You think you can stop it?" I kept my eyes on the blade, mind racing through the clues I'd pieced together in the humid nights. The hidden tunnels under the house, the laudanum doses in the birthing teas, the way each vanished woman had signed over her dowry before the end. Devil's hand, huh? More like yours, Elias. You drowned him in the bog, weighted with stones, all to keep this plantation from slipping away. But I found the letters your first wife wrote to her sister, begging for help before you silenced her. He lunged, rag first, but I sidestepped, grabbing his wrist and twisting until the knife clattered free. We grappled in the dim light, his breath hot and ragged against my neck, years of resentment fueling his swings. I was no brawler, bookish detective from Boston, more at home with ledgers than fists, but the stakes burned in me. This curse had stolen 5 lives, left children motherless, and I'd come south on a promise to my own kin, tied by blood to one of the lost. The wife, Lillian her name was, scrambled back, shielding the baby. "He said it was for the greater good," she sobbed, "that the Harrington blood demanded sacrifice to thrive." Her words hit like a gut punch. She'd believed his tales, drunk the poisoned chalice of his charm until the birth revealed the truth. Elias broke free, slamming me against a beam. Pain exploded in my ribs, but I drove my knee up, catching him in the gut. He wheezed, doubling over, and I pinned him, knee to his back. "It's over," I growled, fishing irons from my coat to cuff his wrists. The click echoed like final judgment. Downstairs the sheriff waited. My telegram had summoned him at dawn, backed by affidavits from surviving kin. As we dragged Elias out, the first light pierced the magnolias, turning the mist golden. Lillian clutched the child tighter, stepping into the yard where freedmen and sharecroppers gathered, their faces a mix of awe and wariness. No cheers, just quiet nods. This land had seen too much sorrow for fanfare. I lingered on the porch as they loaded Elias into the wagon, his curses fading into the bayou's hum. The curse was broken, but the scars remained. Empty rooms in the big house, whispers in the fields that might never fade. Lillian approached, the baby stirring in her arms. "What now, Mr. Hale? For us?" I met her gaze, the weight of it all settling like dew on my shoulders. "You rebuild. Sell this place if you must, but keep what's yours. The Harrington name ends with him." She nodded, a spark of resolve in her eyes, and I turned toward the river road, the paddle steamer waiting to carry me north. As the wheels churned the mud, I thought of the women before her, ghosts in the water. We'd won, but victory tasted of ash, ingenuity against cruelty, grit against lies. Mississippi rolled on, unyielding, and I wondered if the next curse hid in plain sight, waiting for another fool to unravel it.